I'm going to start this story with an image burned forever into my memory. It was a Tuesday morning, mid-September. The crisp autumn air smelled like pine and wet earth, exactly the way it should on my land. I had just pulled my old pickup truck onto what was supposed to be my empty, wild, 20-acre lot, the place I called the Haven, the one piece of silent forest I kept sacred and swore I'd one day retire to. But instead of the familiar tangle of ancient oaks and whispering pines, there it was, an architectural monstrosity. A brand new 9,000-square-foot palace of polished limestone and glass, a gleaming testament to sheer unadulterated entitlement, complete with a circular driveway and a pretentious, three-tiered marble fountain gently bubbling right in the dead center of my legally recorded property line. I actually had to check my GPS because for a split second, I thought I'd taken a wrong turn and ended up in the Hamptons. But no, the pin was right there, blinking innocently over the 6-car garage of someone else's fever dream. The next thing I remember, a woman glided out, like a swan who'd traded the pond for a platinum membership at a country club. She was in immaculate white tennis gear, clutching a kale and collagen smoothie, and had that kind of impossibly sleek blonde ponytail that screamed, "I have people for everything." She saw me, waved dismissively with her free hand, the phone still pressed to her ear, and chirped, "Excuse me, you're idling on private property. Move along, darling, or security will have to get involved." Her voice was all sugar and knives, the kind that clearly hadn't heard the word no since she was in kindergarten. I leaned back in the seat, reached into my glove compartment and pulled out the crisp, laminated copy of my deed, the document I carry for every property I manage, because as a real estate lawyer, I learned early you always have to have your receipts. "No," I said, my voice steady, professional, cutting through her suburban chirping like a razor blade. "You built a house on my land." She actually paused her conversation, lowered her oversized Chanel sunglasses, and hit me with a laugh, loud, bright, utterly condescending, the kind that makes you instinctively check if you have something stuck in your teeth. "Oh, bless your heart, sweetie," she purred, her eyes expertly made up to convey maximum pity. "This is Crestview Estates property. Has been for years. I'm Victoria Thorne, president of the association, and I personally approved this development for my son's family. You're mistaken, and that was her first monumental mistake. She thought I was just some random guy who got lost, some peasant who couldn't afford her zip code. She didn't realize I wasn't just the landowner. I was Daniel Sterling, the attorney who'd made a career fighting and winning these exact types of property disputes against people who believe their title and their money are interchangeable. She had just picked a fight with a lawyer over his favorite piece of land, and I knew in that instant she was about to face the most entitled, litigious mistake of her very entitled life. I bought the Haven 8 years ago. It was remote, peaceful, and the best part, it was a solid mile outside the boundaries of the rapidly expanding town of Crestview and, crucially, outside any homeowners association jurisdiction. I had the land surveyed twice, everything officially recorded with the county registrar, the boundaries locked down with concrete markers. It was my escape. But over those 8 years, Crestview grew, and with it came the Crestview Estates HOA, and leading the charge was Victoria Thorne. Victoria was local legend for her iron fist. She once fined a neighbor $700 for a mailbox that was apparently a quarter-inch too tall for the community standard, and she waged a years-long war against a sweet, elderly couple who had the audacity to plant a small vegetable garden that disrupted the beige and boxwood aesthetic. She was notorious for carrying a steel ruler to measure grass height. So when her slick developer son-in-law, a guy named Bryce Holloway, wanted a prime spot for a new ultra-luxury spec home, Victoria, seeing an opportunity to play Queen Regent, set her sights on my pristine, untouched forest. The fact that it wasn't hers was an afterthought. She simply insisted my parcel was community spillover, referencing an utterly bogus 1998 HOA expansion map. When Sarah Chen, my former partner, and I finally got to see that map during discovery, it literally looked like someone had drawn it in crayon and scanned it in. The lines didn't align with any legitimate survey markers, but somehow my legally established parcel had magically been pulled inside their boundary. Victoria never checked the public records. She never consulted a lawyer. She just green-lit Bryce's entire development, using her presidential authority to rush the approvals through her rubber-stamp architectural committee, which was essentially just her best friend, and her friend's perpetually absent husband. I was across the country, knee-deep in a corporate case when the bulldozers rolled in. My elderly neighbor, Mr. Henderson, tried desperately to call me, but I was in court. By the time I got his frantic voicemails, they had already flattened about 5 acres of century-old trees, the ones I used to sit under just to hear the wind. I caught the first red-eye flight back. What I saw wasn't just a house. It was a pure, unadulterated monument to hubris. Imported Italian limestone, a 1,000-bottle temperature-controlled wine cave, custom Brazilian hardwood floors, and a free-form swimming pool shaped, I swear to God, like an enormous lazy comma. And the cherry on top? No county permits, no zoning variances, no environmental studies. Nothing. But somehow the utilities were connected, the plumbing running, and at the end of the driveway, a massive, custom-forged iron sign read, "The Thorn Residence." I drove straight to the HOA headquarters, a glorified strip mall office, and of course, Victoria was there, perched behind a mahogany desk like a queen on her suburban throne. "Mr. Sterling," she said, looking up from a stack of violation notices, "I trust you've seen the improvements we've made to that abandoned lot." "My lot," I corrected sharply, slamming my deed onto her desk. "The one you've illegally developed without permission." She glanced at the deed like it was a greasy takeout receipt. "We're asserting historical community right-of-way. Based on the continuous use and improvement doctrine," she recited, those legal words rolling off her tongue like she'd Googled them 5 minutes before. It was HOA speak for, "We squatted and we did it with style." I dropped my voice into the lowest, steadiest tone I use in the courtroom, the one that tells my opponent the polite conversation is over. "Victoria, you built a 9,000-square-foot structure on private property without a single permit. That's trespassing, it's theft, it's criminal conversion, and frankly, it's about 4 other felonies I can rattle off without looking at a statute book." She just leaned back in her expensive leather chair, flashed a smirk, and purred, "Prove it in court, then. Mr. Sterling, in the meantime, security will be escorting you off Crestview Estates property." That was the line. That was her second and truly final mistake. I walked out, called Sarah Chen, and within 48 hours, we had pulled every single county record. Black and white, irrefutable. I was the sole legal owner of the entire 20-acre parcel. No sale, no transfer, no easement, no lien. When we showed the file to Chief Building Inspector Harrison, a man who'd been inspecting for 4 decades, his face went completely gray. Victoria hadn't filed a single legitimate permit. Instead, she'd submitted a stack of internal HOA forms, pretending they carried the weight of county approval. Worse, she'd bankrolled the whole thing with HOA funds, burying the $1 million cost under landscaping and community enhancement in the budget. She'd essentially embezzled her neighbor's money to build her son's luxury home. I filed a formal cease and desist order immediately. Victoria's response? Doubling down, hiring private security guards to block the entrance to my own land, putting up barricades and a sign that read, "Private association use only. Violators will be prosecuted." That was the mistake that made me call the sheriff's department. Deputy Miller arrived within the hour. He took one look at my deed, then at the ridiculous private guards, and sighed like a man who just wanted to go home and see his kids. "Ma'am," he said to the head guard, "you are going to move these traffic cones and allow this gentleman access to his property." "But Victoria Thorne said," the guard stammered. "I don't care what Victoria Thorne said." Miller cut him off, his voice suddenly sharp. "This is his land. You move the cones or I arrest you for obstruction and failure to comply with a lawful order." The cones vanished instantly. I walked up the newly paved driveway with Deputy Miller at my side and a process server right behind me, carrying a fat, heavy envelope. We found Victoria lounging on her faux Mediterranean patio, sipping an Aperol Spritz with Bryce. She looked up, annoyed. "Patricia Thorne?" the process server asked. "Yes," she drawled. "You've been served." The moment she tore open that summons, the mask finally cracked. For the first time, her perfectly controlled, smug composure dissolved into pure, raw panic. In court, my case was an absolute slam dunk. Judge Eleanor Vance, a no-nonsense veteran, reviewed the evidence with growing disbelief. My deed predated the HOA by a decade. Her historical map was revealed to be the sloppy, fraudulent nonsense it was. "Mrs. Thorne," the judge said, peering over her glasses, "did you at any point check the actual property records with the county registrar?" Victoria's nervous lawyer mumbled something about executive interpretation of community boundaries. "That is not what I asked," the judge snapped. "Did you check the records?" Victoria straightened her back, still clinging to her queenly facade. "I have executive authority as president to make development decisions in the community's best interest." The judge's unimpressed look said it all. She granted me a full injunction and ordered an independent appraisal for damages. More importantly, she stated in clear terms that the district attorney would be well within their rights to pursue serious criminal charges. But that was only the beginning. I immediately filed a civil lawsuit against the HOA itself for trespassing, unlawful development, and illegal land conversion. And Sarah, being the tactical genius she is, made absolutely sure that every single homeowner in Crestview Estates received notice that their dues had paid for Victoria's personal mansion. The revolt was instant and explosive. An emergency HOA meeting was called, standing room only. The air was thick with fury. Victoria's longtime ally, who served as treasurer, was the first to break, tears streaming down her face. "She told me it was for a new community clubhouse fountain. I had no idea she was using our money for a personal palace." Then the floodgates opened. Neighbor after neighbor stood up, airing years of pent-up grievances. The fines for uneven shutters, the infamous vegetable garden debacle, the petty citations for the wrong shade of trim paint. A kindly old doctor, Dr. Allenby, who had been fined repeatedly for a compost bin that was 2 feet too close to the property line, stood up, trembling, and said, "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence." The vote was unanimous. Victoria Thorne was removed from her throne in utter disgrace, escorted out of the community center as she shrieked about ungrateful peasants and architectural purity. 2 months later, the civil judgment landed. $2.8 million in damages, plus full ownership rights to the structure on my land. Victoria's personal assets were frozen. The HOA's insurance company flat out refused to cover criminal acts, which meant, in the end, I owned the 9,000-square-foot house Victoria had built for herself. To celebrate, I hosted what I called the Reclamation Barbecue on the marble patio. Every single neighbor in Crestview Estates showed up. We grilled burgers and hot dogs, kids splashed happily in the absurd comma-shaped pool, and laughter, real, warm, genuine laughter, echoed through the space that Victoria's iron-fisted rule had kept sterile and joyless. At one point, Victoria drove by in her modest, newly acquired used Honda Civic, her luxury cars long since sold to cover her mounting legal fees. She rolled down the window and screamed, "This isn't over! I'll sue you for everything you own." Deputy Miller, who was off duty and enjoying a hot dog, just strolled casually to the curb. "Ma'am," he said, taking a bite, "you just rolled right through that stop sign. License and registration, please." The ticket was, I heard, substantial. She fought it, of course. She lost. I've since turned that ridiculous 1,000-bottle wine cave into a custom woodworking shop. The 3-tiered marble fountain was replaced with a charming koi pond, which I cheekily named Victoria's Folly. The comma-shaped pool remains for now, though I'm considering remodeling it into something a little less ostentatious, maybe just a simple rectangle. I now spend part of the year living in the very mansion Victoria built with other people's money on my land. The irony, I can assure you, is never lost on anyone, especially during the monthly neighborhood barbecues we now host. The laughter and music echo through the same space she tried to claim as her personal empire. When the criminal trial finally came, it was even worse for her. Prosecutors revealed Victoria had pulled off similar schemes, though never on this scale, in 2 other states. They laid out a 15-year pattern of blatant fraud and embezzlement. The jury deliberated for less than 90 minutes, guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, embezzlement, criminal trespass, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced her to 10 years in federal prison and ordered millions in restitution. As the bailiff clicked the handcuffs around her wrists, Victoria's perfect facade shattered completely. She shrieked, her voice cracking. 10 years! But I'm the HOA president. No, Victoria, I whispered to myself, a small, deep sense of justice finally settling in my chest. Not anymore. You're just a felon. So tell me, if you were me, what would you do with that ridiculously enormous comma-shaped swimming pool? Would you keep it as a monument to her folly? Or would you reshape it into something more humble? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if you think justice was served, and subscribe for more stories of suburban entitlement hitting the legal brick wall. Thanks for watching.